We are here today to talk about BettyBlocks Open and the end of vendor lock-in, as you might have seen, of course, on the slides already up on the screen for a couple of minutes. This is a really important topic to us, not only from a company strategic point of view, but also from a, let's say, a moral point of view as well. Especially for me as a low-code founder, being in the space for such a long period, I'm very happy that we can have made this happen and that we can offer it to our customers today. So if you're interested in what we're discussing today, feel free to reach out to me or one of my colleagues, and we're, of course, more than willing to tell you more about how you can make use of it. So let's start with a quote. I think it was from Klaus Schwab, a very polarizing person nowadays, and he said something polarizing as well, because he quoted or said, you will own nothing and be happy. This is a trend that emerged some time ago when it was all about time sharing. So you should not own a car. You will share a car with somebody else. And this quote came out of that as well. And a lot of things emerged out of that as well. And it also applied to software in a way as well, right? We have moved from perpetual licenses where you just buy it and then you can use it the rest of your life to software as a service. And in a way that this quote also applies to SaaS as well. You will own nothing and be happy. We don't really agree with this, especially in terms of software and the custom software you generate yourself. So let's first take a look at what low-code reality now is at this moment across the space outside of the BettyBlocks bubble that we're in right now. So as mentioned, you build it, but you don't own it, right? So low-code at this moment is based on proprietary runtimes, non-standard code, and no way to get out of it. And the costs are spiraling out of control. We believe that software costs has spun out of control in general whatsoever. There's been a lot written about that as well. Jason Lemking, who is quite an authority in terms of SaaS, he wrote an excellent blog about, let's say, the decline in budgets in IT. Most of the budget now goes to AI and everything else. There's little budget for that left. That is also because company has spent so much money and effort on implementing SaaS with little return every now and then. So those costs need to be rationalized, and that is where we can help as well. But in terms of low code in general, as we state, right, the industry has you locked in, the industry has you trapped, and nobody likes that, right? I've been talking to a low code a partner in the space this week as well. I think they are in this call as well, listening in. And we discussed this as well. And they see that, and we see that with customers as well, is that they are no longer willing to pay a large amount of money for software because that money is no longer there. So we need to adapt to that reality from the technology point of view, but also from the cost perspective and the license perspective. Right? If you look at it at a wider scale, like when I was younger, I started making software when I was 11, and I'm 46, so I'm old. So that's a long time ago. And I was very happy and pleased with, let's say, the open source movement when it arose, right? It's a really cool society thing where people build software and they share it. But what happened is that throughout the years, right, with SaaS and with low code, the software industry was moving backwards, right? So the promise was that, let's say, this as a service would bring you speed and efficiency, but in real life, it just meant you're dependent and you've lost control. So at the end, you believe that software should have been cheaper as it scales, especially with SaaS, and you own it if you build it, right? And then you should be able to run it everywhere. And that is where BettyBlocks is about, is that what you build, you own it. And nowadays with AI generation, it is more relevant than ever, because there are so many options that you can choose from. And that's why this Betty Blocks Open is really important in terms of application generation, because it doesn't only position us towards other low-code vendors who still have lock-in, have high license costs, but also towards, let's say, AI application generation as well. Right? And we can do both, but you need to do it the right way, because otherwise you're in trouble with both the low-code thing as the AI code generation bit. So our mandate is open source. You should have portability. Pick it up, run it somewhere else. And if you pick it up and run it somewhere else, right, that thing that you pick up should not have a dependency with something else. Because that is what you see. Some other vendors in the low-code space will tell you, hey, you can get the code and you can take it anywhere. That is the last bit is probably not true, but it's also the matter that all that code has a dependency with proprietary stuff, with licensed stuff. So you can't really run it without the license that you need for that specific platform. So we are ending that. And we've been doing that for a longer period. And I'm here today to talk about the technology bit of it. So how do we really do that? How do we make it happen? Just a glance under the hood. So this is going to be somewhat technical. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or ask it in the Q&A section if we have that switched on. I think we have that. And I'll be more than happy to answer all the questions that you have. So let's go. Nerd mode on. So for us, this is the best way to build apps, agents, or automations with AI, right? So this is not only about low code. Low code is radically changing every day, every moment, every second at this moment, and all of it is AI. And with us, all of it is AI as well. You use AI to generate an app, and that app is going to be infused with AI. If you're in AI, in IT, and you don't like AI, then you should definitely find another job. But truth be told, if you go to that next job, they will bother you about AI anyway. So let's first start with the AI code generation bit, right? So all of you probably have tried it somewhere else, right? And rightfully so. Either you use Claude Code or you use Gemini, all the big LLMs, or a more specific application generation tool like Replit or Lovable, for instance. So how they approach it is that AI generates code. And that's pretty cool because normally you should need to have a science degree, like I have to be able to write code. And now you just write a prompt and the AI makes your code. That sounds cool. And it still is, of course. But if you're in an enterprise concept, that's pretty hard because how do you make sure that that is secure? Right. So I had a discussion earlier today with our security officer, and we found out that somebody somewhere in the organization generated an app and he put contract data in that app. I was happy that it was on our platform because I know that I could tell our security officer, right? If it's on our platform, we know it's boxed in. But imagine being in a different company and you're not using a platform like ours. That means that contract data might have been sent to your vendor somewhere, and that might be in an insecure environment anyway. So that code can be insecure, but the environment as well. So like that's a double dip. If AI generates code, so AI still is like a fortune teller, right? It can tell by the basis of where you are how the rest of the sentence or the code should look like, and that's really awesome. And the creativity that it brings is humongous, and we like that a lot. The only thing is what you don't want is to generate millions of lines of code, and then you need to maintain that as well, right? And that helps if you just trust your AI that it will be safe. But everybody who's used AI knows you can't trust AI because it has never been meant to be trusted, right? It's a creativity thing and a generation thing, not a trust thing. And the problem with code is that code degrades over time. So that means that the longer you have not touched it and you need to change something, the harder it becomes to manage. So generating code is really cool, but it just creates a whole new and bigger problem when you have applications being generated which are based on code. And especially if you're a senior developer somewhere, you have seen the code and you're like, this is not how I envision it to be. So that means that you need to clean it up, make sure that it becomes maintainable. So this model does not scale. So we have a different model. So what our AI does, we use it for creativity. And what it does is it generates metadata. And we have this system of metadata who has been battle tested and proven for years, right? So there are a lot of enterprise customers and others using our meta model for years. And we know it generates code which is maintainable, which is secure. And we also make sure that our metadata model that ensures the consistency of your application as well, right? Everybody who's used the platform has seen the, let's say, the continuous iteration because you want to run that app and it doesn't work, right? That's not possible with our meta model. So we believe that generating metadata first and then creating code is a better model than directly generating code, especially for the type of apps that we're in, right? So we help customers build workflows, internal, external facing applications, right? So a lot of them are at departmental level. So that means that IT doesn't have the time to supervise it all the time. So you want to have a proven model. So generating with BettyBlocks, generating an application with the in-between step of first generating that metadata is a better model. So it sounds like, hey, but I want to see that app. Don't bother me with all of that metadata stuff, right? You don't see it, right? The experience is exactly the same. The only thing is your long-term outcome is more guaranteed with us than with others. So this is, as mentioned, somewhat of a nerd way to approach it, but it's really important if you want to make sure, if you're an IT manager somewhere, or a CIO, or you're just a business owner somewhere, you want to make sure that you have stuff, you can just focus on the creativity bit. You don't need to bother about security stuff. So that's what we offer. Because that code, right, that is secure, it has been battle tested, but you can't trust AI with your production code without reviewing it, right? So you need to review it because before you know it, you have a security risk somewhere. As mentioned, it's been proven over the years in production environments, in heavy duty environments. All of it is maintainable. And what I would say is just challenge us and challenge yourself. Just download the code and I will show you in a second or in a couple of minutes how that is done. Send it to a senior developer, right? Ask them what they think of it, right? Because we believe that it's the same quality as your senior developer. The only thing is that you don't need to have that senior developer. And we will guarantee that the quality is there every time, right? The problem with AI, it's not deterministic, right? You have a different outcome every time when you use AI, and we don't have that, right? We know how that code is going to look like, and we know it is secure. We know it works. We know it is high performance. But hopefully you can pick up the challenge, and otherwise you can just send this video as well. If you have your note taker on, or just download it later. It will be available on our YouTube as well. And I will show you the code and then can have a look at it without downloading it. But it would be cool to see you guys having a run with it. So open also means open architecture. And it's that architecture that really makes it special. And I'm by heart, I am still a developer. Sorry about that, right? That the moment you become a developer, especially at a young age, you will always be a developer. So I'm happy with that, and I'm probably proud of it as well. So the more nerdy it gets today, the happier I am. So bear with me. So let's start with this slide first. So let's start to the right top, where you see the AI icon. So that is what we just explained. So you use AI, you just prompt it, and we will generate metadata, right? So we store that in a database, and after that prompting, we automatically compile it. And let's start with the front end first. So that's the top arrow here. We generate into a React application. React is still the default standard if it comes to front end applications. There are other environments as well, but we have chosen to do React. If you want to do something else, then let us know. There are options to do so. And you can also bring your own component set, your own design system, and our AI will include that and will generate an application based on the design system that you have, right? How cool is that? So that is the first step. That's the most straightforward thing, right? So that's the difference with other ones. The other ones directly generate the React application, and we do it with this in-between step that you see here. And with that, we can guarantee that your code is optimized and readable, and also very efficient as well. right? So sometimes when you generate code, you get all this bulky code. And the more code you have, the more you need to maintain. And our model is a little bit different. We have a lot of open source components which are managed by a community, and we rely on that. So that means that there's a lot of code that you don't need to maintain because it's not yours. At the end result, right, the collection of everything is still yours. That is really important to us. You can download it in any moment that you like, so you can always leave Betty Blocks as well. We are not Hotel California. You can check out at any moment. There's always like, hey, how do you make money? Well, we still have a contract, right? So you decide to go to our platform for a certain moment, right? That's what we agree upon. Then you stay with us. If that moment is gone, that contract is over, then you can go somewhere else. You can also go somewhere else earlier, but then, right, the contract still holds. So that's the front end bit, and then the back end is also really cool. I'm really proud of what we have done. There's a interview where I interview Liam Randall, the founder of WasmCloud, and Cosmonic. It's on our YouTube. If you go to our YouTube, I think it's probably in the top list somewhere. Otherwise, just give it a quick search. And WasmCloud are also the people behind WebAssembly. And I will dive into that later on, but that's really cool technology. I will explain it as a compile target. It's kind of nerdy, but hopefully some of you will get it. But there will be more about that later on. And all of that runs on Kubernetes. As React is the default standard for front end, Kubernetes is that for running software on a cloud somewhere or on a server. Kubernetes is also an open source initiative and is standardized as well. If you want to run Kubernetes, you can go to DigitalOcean. You can go to your local vendor. So for our sovereign cloud, we work together with CISO, which is a Dutch provider, but they also provide clouds in Germany and other parts of Europe. But you can also go to Microsoft Azure if that's your preferred way, a vendor of choice. All of them offer something which is called managed Kubernetes. So that means that you just sign up and you get an account for free. But if you want to run it on premise, it's quite easy to install as well. I won't dive into that because there are a lot of folks who understand that. And if you don't understand it, you just sign up for a free account or a cheap account somewhere, and you also have Kubernetes, and you can run your Betty Blocks app there if you want. On top of that, we run different open source projects to make sure your application runs. So, and the most important part is WasmCloud. The other part is a database, and other elements are simple infrastructure elements like a key vault. The interesting part of Betty Blocks Open is that all of those decisions are yours. So if you want to choose, or you already have a specific key vault that you want to use, so a key vault is used to store your API token, for instance, right? So you have an application and it connects to OpenAI. You need to store that that token somewhere, and you want to store that in a let's say in a modern way for your application, and you store that in a key vault. So with our WasmCloud setup, you can use any key vault that you like, and same goes for a lot of different services, right? So that is part of our open setup. Is that our setup is an open project and an open source based setup, and it can adhere to what you how you have set it up already yourself, right? What happens a lot is that you need to change your setup to make it work with your application, and this works the other way around. This is really flexible and based on open standards and open technology. On top of that, there's the WebAssembly components, but let's dive into that part first. So I see there's one rectangle missing here, but you see open source projects. That is this latter part or this lower part, right? WasmCloud and Kubernetes bit. And there's also a bit which is part of that same cloud, is the React application and WebAssembly, and that is being generated, right? But all of this, make sure your application runs. And it sounds more complicated, or it looks more complicated than it actually is in real life. But if you have some experience with running an application, this is probably pretty standard to you. So how does that WebAssembly bit in that architecture works? So there's a React application. A React application is something that your browser downloads, right? So you go to a URL, it downloads the React application. That is where all the front end stuff is. And it connects to a backend. That backend is a WebAssembly / WasmCloud based. We have chosen to generate GraphQL for you. So that means that the means of communication between your front and back end is GraphQL. That is also somewhat of an industry standard right now. I think it is coined officially first by Facebook a long time ago, if I'm correct, and is a great way for front end and back ends to talk to each other. Again, this is low-level nerd stuff. As a developer of Betty Blocks, you don't see anything of this. It just works. And I can show that in a later bit of this demo. There are two parts of that backend, which all of that is based on WebAssembly. There's a data API which connects to the database that you saw in the other diagram, and there's a generated action or a workflow. That workflow, imagine you click on a button and a record needs to be deleted. I'm going to show you that in a minute. That means that you click on a button, that React app needs to call that backend service. It does that over GraphQL, and there's an action, right, a workflow that connects to the database and tells the database you need to delete record with ID XY. That is what an example of an action is. Could also be more lengthy, right, syncing and all kinds of other stuff, but that is what it is. The fun part of this is that because we use WebAssembly, that action can be generated in any language that you like, because WebAssembly, it's not 100% true in a lot of languages. And I just provided some examples here. It could be a Python, TypeScript, C# or Java. So this setup can again adhere to what you already have. If you have experienced Java or Python developers, right, we could imagine you choosing your Betty Block setup to be Python, because that means that if you want to leave Betty Blocks, or if you want to monitor the code that we generate for you, you can download that code at any moment, have a experienced dev look at it. I'm like, hey, is this still cool? Are we cool? Yeah, can we continue? And that means there's no awkward exit moment where if you decide to continue a project in high code, that most of the time a lot of developers will behave according to the concept of not invented here. That means that everything that is not written by a developer is not okay. So the earlier you sync that, the better it is for you as a company. That paradigm will change over time as well, because code is already being generated either by our compiler or by AI for a lot of things. So the role of a developer is being reshaped every second, I would even say. Yeah, but there's a lot being written about that on LinkedIn and other media. So that front end, maybe to summarize, right? Standard React, there's nothing proprietary Betty Blocks, nothing zero. It runs on Apollo, which is a GraphQL client, open source. And that connects to a GraphQL server, which is also open source. So there's nothing Betty Blocks. So if you want to continue to work that, right, use it. You don't need to learn how Betty Blocks does things, because there is no longer a Betty Blocks way. Maybe some really small details. So that means that there are no runtime dependencies. There's nothing Betty Block specific in terms of frameworks, right? So you can download all of those frameworks and review the code if you want to. Please don't start to review React because that's really lengthy, and I think you can just trust that it works. React also comes from Facebook, if I'm correct, and Meta. So you might not like the network, but you do like the technology, perhaps. And the code that we generate is something that every React developer will understand, but I will show you that later on. This means that we have true portability from the very first moment you start developing your app, right? At any moment, you can stop using our platform and just send it to your React developer and continue, or you are a React developer and you can just continue to develop yourself. Again, that backend is WebAssembly. So maybe to explain, while we are in nerd mode now, there are different types of languages. There are the interpreted ones and there are the compiled ones, just making it a little bit generic right now. An interpreter means that every time when you load a web page, it will always execute all of that code, right? The text that you've written will be interpreted and then your page will be visible. A compiled version will mean that your code, before you run it, will be compiled, and the compiled artifact is something you put on a server, and then when you call it, so there's an in-between step. The fun part with WebAssembly, that doesn't matter that much. So you can use, as mentioned, Python, C#, Java, the likes. By default, we use TypeScript. TypeScript/JavaScript is still the most on the planet. That's why we chose for that one as a default setup. Most of the developers understand that. And you can run it everywhere where you'd like. WebAssembly is pretty cool because you can also just run it in your browser. Your browser is also a WebAssembly runtime. And there are gazillion means to run a WebAssembly component. That's the fun part of this standard, managed by the Bytecode Alliance. That's a shout out to the Cosmonic folks as well, because they are part of that as well and are putting a lot of effort without getting paid in making sure this happens. So make sure to also touch base with Cosmonic and buy their software as well, because that helps the open source initiative. So that makes it language agnostic. A WebAssembly component always runs in a sandbox. So that means that that code which is compiled in a WebAssembly component that can't access the outside world, that is by architecture safe. And that is really important as well. And that means that you can just rely on that setup. So all of this is how we break vendor lock-in by first just embracing open source and open standards and making sure that what we generate runs in that whole setup. And it's really cool. It's really progressive as well, right? Not everybody has read up on WebAssembly. It is the future. So we are one of the first to adopt it in a low-code setup, if not the first. So I think this is really cool. And all the benefits are yours, right? So there's so much benefit to it. It's more performant. It is independent, right? There are really no downsides to this. To explain again, right? So maybe you can let's leave it like it is right now. But right, there's this whole setup where you have Kubernetes and then you have WasmCloud. So why do we need that WasmCloud? WebAssembly is just compiled code, right? So you write something in Python, you run it through a WebAssembly open source compiler, and then you have a WebAssembly artifact, a component. You can run that in your browser if you like. You can run it on your machine. If you just install WasmTime, you can run it. There are multiple ways to run a Wasm component. The interesting part at the backend, at server level, is that you can create a web services-based setup or a component-based setup of your application. I read an interesting, hopefully interesting post on LinkedIn about the future of AI-generated code and making sure you set up your code base in a modular way, right? Splitting your application in functional sections is going to be more and more important because you can create applications with BettyBlock so fast. You need to make sure that it stays maintained and maintainable. And you do that by stripping it into different components. If you are a developer, you need to do that by hand. If you're in BettyBlocks, that automatically happens for you. BettyBlocks strips your application, puts it in several modules, and runs it for you. But that means you have different WebAssembly components which need to be able to work together. And that is where WasmCloud comes into play, because it is a way to run in a distributed way WebAssembly-based applications. So that's an application based on different WebAssembly components. Right, you can run it on any Kubernetes setup. Installing is just as simple as just installing the WasmCloud operator, which you can find on their website. Just go to wasmcloud.com and there's information to do so. So it's really simple to get started. And it's a CNCF open source standardized as well. So it is not this exotic group of people on the in the outskirts of the internet. It is right in the center of the open source community. Security is built into all of this. It has been battle tested as well, right? If you look it up, there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies using this already at this moment, but it's not really widely recognized yet. But today we are here to make that happen. So this WasmCloud piece is also interesting if you're not into low code and you want to manually code everything, and by any chance you're watching this, welcome. It's also really cool for that as well. So make sure to have a look at it. As mentioned, the fun part of WebAssembly is that, right, WebAssembly is a compiled target at the end, the WebAssembly version. So you can compile it with different languages, as you see here. For me personally, Rust is my language of choice nowadays, but you might be in a .NET environment, which is totally fine. somewhat. You can also use Go or the other ones. So if you want to run a .NET component in your Betty Blocks environment, then we can make that happen as well. Just let us know, and we will show you how you can do that. So let's go to the nerdy bit, even more nerdy, and view the React code. Let me first go to our platform here. So this is just a demo application where you have this block backend, right? So it doesn't really matter what the functionality is. This is how it works. You can go to the actions bit, right? So there's some action here, and oh man, oh wait. When this is done, and because of this demo environment might take a long, you can click on this download button, and then I will do that in a second when it's done, and then you can go to your code environment, and you have it here. Right, so there are two projects already downloaded or extracted the zip that it runs for you. But just to prove it, I will show it later on, but let's not waste time. So there's this, this is the React component, if I'm correct. Yes, it is. And we also here have the backend component, right? Those are two different projects, which you can just download and view as I'm doing it right now. So let's first start with the front end. So this is the React component. Let's remove this. This is just a pretty simple. So we use Bun to compile it. Bun is a really cool environment as well, which is a JavaScript runtime. But I won't bother you with that. But you get it for free. When you use this, it's just a package that you automatically get installed. So this is a simple React application, which shows like a normal React application. Again, there are no hard dependencies here. The only thing is right, we use the React router DOM, which is also, I think, the standard as well. And we have the router. This is all being generated for you. All right, and you can see it over here, the different ones that we have. So over here, we have the articles overview. If you go to the pages here, you will see the articles overview is, of course, the index in here. And you see all the cool stuff in here. Wait, this is the new, is it not? Let me see if I got the right one. Oh, yes, I have. So I won't dive into all the details. I just want to scroll through it and explain it a little bit, because this is just standard React code. What is interesting here, as mentioned, we use a GraphQL client, from Apollo. That's an open source project. I think that's the most commonly used in terms of React and GraphQL. And we generate a GraphQL query for you. That is this one. That's the fun part. The React and the backend already knows they exist, so it generates both for you. And this is being sent to our backend, to the data API, which you might remember. As you can see, you can also click on a button here, and then it deletes a specific record. So how does that show? Let me go to the articles overview here. So this is that same page, but then our visual representation of that. So what you can see here is a tab which we call page resources. So this is the collection of articles that you notice here, and that directly refers to this bit. That's why this one is called articles. And this is what we generate under the hood. So this resource here directly correlates with this piece of code. There's also this action here, and I can go to that by clicking on this icon. Really straightforward, right? So this model is going to be deleted, and that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. But you don't need to bother about that because it's tied to this button here. There's a delete button, and what it does on click, as you can see here, on click, it runs a action, and that is the delete record action over here, and it sends the specific record with you. How is that being translated? There is a run action. Oh, here it is already. This is the run action. You can see the same name over here. That is just this code, right? So our goal is also to generate as little code as possible, because the more code we generate, the more at the end you need to maintain when you exit our platform. So we really keep it small and nimble, but it still works. So we try to stand on the shoulders of giants in terms of other projects, and we just connect the dots together. If you go to another page, like the new one here, right, there are all these components in here, and there's also this text input. And it says enter your article. So that is, let me go to the, right, that is this page. Oh, let me log in pretty quick. Here we are, right? That is enter your article here. That is this bit. And that is this component, enter your article title, right? It's pretty straightforward. So what happens here is it gets the value here, right? And what it does here, when that changes, it gets stored in state. It's pretty cool. And that state is also available if you go to the new page. Go to the create. Right, there's this state which is called create article in here, and that is mimicking this form. So a React app, and that is how you would normally set it up as well. It stores it first in state, and that state's being sent to the backend. And that is what this one does. So we have this action here, and then these fields are being mapped on the database fields. That is what it is. So again, how does that look? We have a mutation where that input, and this is going to be that state bit, and then you run that action again. It's pretty straightforward. It's a small app, by the way, as well. And that is what happens in this bit, right? We store it into state. That is what this one does there. What's also interesting is, of course, the components that we also generate for you. So there's a text component, text input here, right? There's this, that's this component. It is nothing more than just a simple React component here, because at the end, you can see it here. It is just a div, and there's a input, I assume, somewhere. Here it is, right? This is all standard React and standard HTML. What we also do is we generate your SCSS classes for you as well. So if you change that here, right, you can change, let me see what I'm doing on here. Yes, trying this one here, right? You can change the styling, and that is being stored in that CSS file there. So that is also what everything does. So if you're a React developer, right, you might not use SCSS, but a different form of that, right? There are a couple of options, but everybody understands this. Of course, there's also the theming that we can apply and automatically apply for you. But as you can see in here, this is all very much readable code and also portable code as well, right? If you're a React developer and you want that text input to behave different, you know how to change this if you're into React. So that's it for the React bit. Let me check if there are any questions around this. Doesn't seem like it. Okay, then we can move on to the backend bit. So what we have here is a WasmCloud project, as you can see in here. That WasmCloud project is the basis of it is an actions component. As mentioned via GraphQL, this action, which is here only for this example, to delete a record from a database, we generate code for that. And that is where you're looking at right now. So this is the generated code in our backend. So this is the action in here. So, right, it has the same ID there, but you get which one it is. And there's a step in it. And what it expects is a model from the type article that you just have seen. And what it does, it runs, so this is the create one. So it creates a record in the database. So it runs this function, which is a create WASM component. So WASM components can call each other. Sounds a little bit difficult, but it's actually not that difficult. So there's a base component which does the routing between the different WASM components. And the WASM components are in here. So there's a WASM component in here, and it's part of this one. So this is the actual interface that we also have available, and it just calls this function in here, right? So it captures the model, which is a article, and then it executes that function. If you want to see how it looks like, you can find that online as well. And this is the actual component that it runs. So as you can see, .wasm. So what this action does nothing more than calling this file in here and then running it executing it. If you want to see how that component looks like, you can go to a GitHub, Petty Blocks. And if I have it right, I think, let's see if I got the right one. Bookstore was native WASM components. There we are. There's a function in here and it is create. There you go. You can go to the source and there's this. This is it. This is all the code you need. I'm not going to dive in detail of that code, but if I go back here, so this component here, this file here, right? This is actually, right, the compiled version of the code that we just saw somewhere else. Again, already announced that this is going to be somewhat nerdy. I truly understand that you might not get all of this right now, but this is more to get a feeling to it. And it's also to prove this is all real. And you can do this yourself as well if you have a BettyBlocks application, which you can have by just going to bettyblocks.com and then starting a prompt here. If you go to our website, build an app to manage my cars, generate app, and it will help you to do so. So that is the backend thing of it. There's also a README here. If you'd like to see that, this is Markdown, so we can preview this here. It tells you how you can run this locally. All right, so this code, you can run it locally and you have your own backend server running on your operating system of choice. Same goes for the other environment here. If I would do run dev, you can open a browser, goes to the root, which is empty, but you go to articles, right? You have it here. I can't show the data right now because I haven't set up the connection with the other component. That is it for the uber nerdy stuff. So I hope you like that. Yeah, there's React code, there's WebAssembly based code, and that is all very much portable. So all of this is really going to change software development because AI is exploding at this moment and all of us want to build apps with AI. And you should, because it's really cool and it's really valuable for your company. Solving problems, if you want to build an app, a portal, an automation, or an AI agent, or maybe a chatbot, all of that you can do it with our platform. And all of that relies on the technology that I've just demoed. And all of that is really straightforward and you can run it everywhere you like. So if you're building automations in N8N, right, which is partially open source as well, right, it is still boxed in. In our platform, everything is even more open. So it opens up a really cool set of opportunities for everyone. So at the end, this all means to you freedom and less license, by the way. That's also not unimportant. As you see here, right, it needs to be cheaper as it scales, and this is really simple to scale. Yeah, so to summarize it again, right, you own it. You can run it everywhere you like, and it builds on open standards. And that's really important as well, because you might be a business manager somewhere, and you're like, hey, I want to make use of this, but I have this senior architect who have seen it all. All of them have seen it all. And they're all like, hey, but this is not okay. That is not okay. But I know that if you show them what I've shown you now, they will be convinced. So try it out with your senior developer, but also try it out with your senior architect or your IT manager. All of them will love this. And we know it because we've tried it and all of them love it. That is it for me now. Let me see if there are any questions. A quick check on the Q&A here. There's the first one here. What happens when the AI gets something wrong? Can users edit the meta model directly, or do they have to reprompt? Well, both is possible. If you are in your, let's say, vibe coding, vibe app building experience, you want to just either edit your prompt or just write a new prompt, right? So if I can go back to the browser here in this environment, I have the right one. No, I don't have that here. All right, you can just write a new prompt or just send an update. So that is the first easiest bit. If the AI is have created a page and that page doesn't look good, right? That font, that typography is in the wrong color. Just click it and change it, right? Again, that is the fastest way. And then our AI model generator will change that, and that code will run without you seeing it, and you have a better version of it. If the AI model gets it wrong and you don't want to use our platform, you can also just go in the nerd mode as I did and just change it at CSS level, right? Those are the options that we have. Another question here, what if I want to run my app outside of BettyBlocks? How difficult is that? And what would you need to do so? You just start with downloading it, as I just did. Click on the download button, and you have the same projects as I just demoed. You can follow the README to get them running locally. But if you want to run it on a server, spin up a Kubernetes environment. Make sure you have WasmCloud installed, which is a one-line command line thing. And you install a MySQL database, for instance. Then you go to My BettyBlocks and you can point your My BettyBlocks to that newly installed setup, and we will make sure your app runs there. That is the easiest route, but you can also do that manually as well. If you don't want to use us anymore, you can just use the README and get it running in that same environment. Another question here, how does versioning work when you regenerate code from the meta model? So BettyBlocks has the first one, we have a sandbox system built in. So if we would go to the sandbox and our My BettyBlocks environment, you see we have different sandboxes available here. So this is a sandbox and you can create many sandboxes. So the first version of, the first part of versioning is making sure you have different branches where you work in. That's the simplest setup. So you can create a production environment, a test environment, an acceptance environment, and a development environment. In that development environment, you can also create multiple branches, especially per developer, right? That means that multiple developers are working on the same application. You can merge it to the same development production. That is identically how you would normally code it yourself as well. We run this almost the same technology underneath there as well. So that is something that I first would encourage. Inside your environment, you can also see the changes in that branch. You can see the changes that there are, right? And you can roll back if you want to. So we have multiple options to do so. That's the interesting part, is that, right, if you're vibe coding your app, before you know it, you have written the wrong prompt and you need to go a whole version back, right? We are the only platform who offers that in a professional way. Can developers modify the React components or WASM modules and still use BettyBlocks? Or is it a one-way door? In terms of React components, you can modify them as long as you keep it inside the BettyBlocks environment, right? And we know you have changed the component. That works. You can create your own component set, as you see in here, right? Where are we again? So if you click on a component, right, all of these options, you can define a component to do that yourself. So if you can create a React component, you can put it in our platform and our platform will work with it. So that also means you can change it. The WASM modules is in the same setup. If you go to this environment, right, these are the ones you get for free, but as it states over here, if you miss a step, you can either go to the My BettyBlocks blog store and go to functions, right? There are quite some there, or you can add it directly here and you just upload a WASM file, which I have here. And you give it a name like this. This is a API connection to the HeyReach platform. I need to put in a description there, and it will read all of the functions that are available in that WASM component. Pretty cool. I won't do it because there are 26 right now, and it takes probably a little bit too much time, but you can change it in here. So if you use our platform, you can do it. Again, with everything, if you stop using our platform, right, 100% flexibility. Do whatever you please. You're on one hand on your own, but it also means you still have flexibility. How do you prevent the AI from generating inconsistent schemas when a user asks for the same thing in a different way? Yeah, so we provide the AI with the structure of your application. So it will always suggest a specific a requirement first, right? So if we have this model in here, right, it won't create an additional article if you already have one, right? If it does so, you will see it because it first suggests what it's going to do. So that is the most sound way to prevent duplicate things, is just rely on the system. Again, there are, as in all things there are, right, you need to make sure that you write your prompt in the right way, because if I would now not create an article, but I would call it post, chances are that it will see it as a different model. But that is, I think, how it would normally go. Okay. Let's see if there are any additional questions left. Let me see. Let's go to this part here. There's a question from Paul. Paul asks, which React version is the app running? We try to run on the latest version of React. So the application just shown was React 19, which brings all the perks of that latest version of React. And if that updates, right, our compiler will be updated accordingly as well, to make sure that we always use the latest version. Thank you for that question, Paul. Okay, let's see and wait a second if we have more questions coming here as well. Doesn't seem like it for now. Let's see how we are time-wise. 55 minutes, so that's a nice length of the webinar here. I think that is it. If you have any additional questions, you can always find me on LinkedIn, or just go to our website. There's an AI agent on our website as well, which you can query for your questions around this topic as well, or just reach out to one of my colleagues. Thank you for joining today. I hope you like it. Make sure to try it out on our website and let us know what you think.